Yeah, okay, that was the Menti poll. I think we'll move on to the next session with Pipina Katsaris, and she will be having an interview on the theme evolving in our careers. Pipina is a lawyer specialized in human rights work and protecting vulnerable groups and individuals, for example, through her work in the Asylum Appeals Committee in Greece, and she's worked in several other places such as Democratic Republic of Congo, Libya, Georgia, Armenia. Worked in the field in this field for 18 years, so pretty experienced with also refugees and asylum, like I mentioned. And besides that, even public published a few different works, also the book called The Law of War Crimes. And along with Pipina Katsaris, we have Desislava Koleva from Bulgaria, and she is currently working in London as a paralegal and studying part-time. And yeah, why don't you go ahead, you two, and start off your session. I'm very curious to hear about this subject. It's very interesting, evolving our careers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're happy to have you. Thank you for coming.
Hello, this is Lava. I'm afraid I cannot hear you. Yes, now we
can. You hear me now?
Yes, indeed.
Lovely, lovely. All right, all right. So, good. So let's then start with the questions.
Questions.
Right.
It doesn't come across as an interview or a job interview, although I'm pretty sure a number of people have or are undergoing this experience as well. But certainly I hope I can share some of my experiences and also what I have accumulated over time as tips, if nothing else.
Well, yeah, of course. I think we have so much to learn, from you based, on the conversations that we previously had. But yeah, can you please let us know how did you actually get where you are right now? I think it will be very interesting, for the audience to know more about some of the landmarks in your career, the ups and downs that you've experienced, the changes that you've experienced, and, ultimately the lessons that you've learned. Yeah, I'll do this folks know.
Indeed, these are lovely questions, and certainly I'd like to just wrap a little bit as concisely as possible my personal experiences. What I will probably recount is more from the personal experiences I had. I don't want people to focus so much on those, but more or less to really see through them, and they can somehow deduct what is the journey that has led me up to here. Obviously, my career, I hope, is ongoing, and there are a number of things I still want to achieve.
Yeah.
But if nothing else, it's very important, as the previous speakers mentioned, to have some goals, have some dreams, but also, enjoy the journey in the meantime. Yeah. I have to say that originally, what I had as a dream is not necessarily what I'm living right now, if we take it very formally. However, I believe that I have somehow achieved my dreams up till now, to the extent that essentially I've been living the principles that I set originally that I wanted to achieve, I wanted to work by. Mm-hmm. So if I may just start with some things that I gained through my childhood, being the daughter of an army officer, some people may understand what that means. I have changed 12 schools, not because I was a maverick, but I think I was very, very principled, and this is something that my parents, and I thank them enormously, they installed a lot of discipline in me, and also focus and some sort of methodologically or methodically working towards goals. Nevertheless, having lived in a village of 100 people, but also in mega cities, in Greece, in the United States, in Belgium, I was required by the circumstances to adapt. to adapt to different cultures, to adapt to different systems. And certainly I had to just see how people are doing things. And they were doing sometimes things very different and sometimes very similarly to what I was accustomed to. It was certainly, it did cultivate my curiosity for things, for people. How do they act? How do they react? And also, it definitely made me see that even in very challenging situations, things that I did not expect, I was hoping for something else. Nevertheless, there was always opportunity to grab, you know, something that you want to learn, and also something that can make you better. So if I were to say, probably even now, a lesson that I learned from my childhood is, you know, be curious. Be curious and acknowledge that things can be done differently. Try to understand what this method is, and try to maybe do it yourself, try it out yourself, and be prepared to adapt, because if nothing else, change will happen. Change will happen inevitably in our personal lives, in our professional lives, in the situation that we live. I mean, now we can only talk about how things changed with the pandemic. Change will happen, and the soonest we're prepared to adapt to new circumstances so that we can still thrive there is, I think, extremely beneficial. Now, as you can understand, with this childhood, I somehow wanted to become a diplomat, and that was a very, very set goal for me. I pictured selfishly a little bit myself being in international cosmopolitan settings, setting high-level policies. And of course, I took for granted that I want to meet people, I want to know more about them, I want to know their opinions, but I want to help have a world more cooperative and a system that is more understanding to the different needs, as well as building and empowering people. Don't ask me how exactly I had this in my mind, but this is what I dreamt, and I was very, very focused on this. So I essentially entered law school, having, as I mentioned, this principled somehow view, but also curiosity for the different. And I was very much following international law subjects in order to prepare myself for this career. Nevertheless, I did fall in love with criminal law and criminology. And this was not something that I had so much experience of, or I knew in advance. I knew about lawyers. But when the professor said at some point, you know what, everyone can commit a crime. You, I, everyone. I'm like, seriously, is that true? Even me. And at some point, you know, the person became very much a focus for me. What is going on through their head? What can they go through? What circumstances in life might actually lead them to commit something that is a crime, or to be a victim of a crime? So in that sense, I was going through a little bit of a dilemma, since I was so focused on the global systems and taking people more as, not focusing so much on their mind, but more on the systems. And now the mind of the person was so appealing to me. And of course, realizing that human rights are there for not only victims, but also perpetrators of heinous crimes. I have to admit that it was a dilemma, but at the same time, I did not leave my original goal. And I tried to combine them a little bit, if I could, to the extent that I could. Now, I had the opportunity, I was supported by my parents. I tried to also find scholarships that could sustain me, as I needed to also be sustained in the meantime. And I pursued 2 masters in laws. One in Greece in criminal sciences, and then also training at the same time as a criminal lawyer. But then on, since some of the answers had not been in front of me, I also pursued an international human rights LLM in the UK at the beautiful University of Essex. And at that point, I also fell in love with the law of war. You know, things were getting a little bit more complicated, but if nothing else, it was still the same somehow goal for me, and I was very satisfied in that regard. So eventually, I also published a book that was mentioned earlier, to combining knowledge from both degrees. And that was probably the second lesson that was very much, set of lessons actually, that was very much in my mind. You know, set ambitions, set intentions, as other speakers spoke about earlier in this conference, in these groups, and do keep your eyes on the ball. But at the same time, you know, allow yourself to be wooed by something that is probably completely different than what you originally thought of. And the journey, as the previous speaker spoke about, is extremely important. And there are probably many ways of reaching where you want to be and what you want to do. Of course, I don't know if people can understand, I'm certainly a risk taker, but I'm very much a calculated risk taker. So to the extent that it is possible, I would probably advise someone, you know, try to see if your dreams or your interests can really converge. In that sense, you might create something completely novel, and also find something that satisfies you very much. And of course, you know, being wooed by something different, I think we also need to ensure that this is what we want, you know, that the novelty is not just a fling, that it's something temporary and then you leave things unfinished. And probably this takes you away from your goal without having completely accepted that risk. I mean, this is what I went through, and I have to admit that I find that rarely would things be mutually exclusive. So, you know, do try to meet the way you want to work, but also allow yourself to see something else and hopefully be a pioneer in a different field. I think another big phase for me, or moment for me, was when I was interning in New York with the UN. It was certainly a very interesting internship, but what marks me still is a talk that I had with a formidable woman, the director of the department I was interning at the time. She was from Uganda. She is from Uganda. And at our farewell gathering, after that, she called me in her office and we had a little bit of time to chat. She had seen, obviously, how I was behaving, the questions I had, the things I wanted to do. And I remember she talked to me about Africa. She talked to me about child soldiers, disarmament programs that she was involved in. She talked to me about an experience that she had been held at gunpoint by a child soldier and how she handled the situation. I mean, it was a little bit too, sometimes much to take in, because certainly I had heard about these programs in my master's, but it was a personal story. And at the end of the short talk, she asked me, you know, you're so interested to know about what's going on in people's heads, what's going on the ground, what people go through. I mean, we even talked about how interesting it is and memorable how the air smells in different places. And she asked, you know, do you really want to continue now studying? Because my goal was to complete the 2 masters and pursue with the PhD, since there were still so many questions left unanswered for me. I mean, she probably doesn't know it, but that was a turning point a little bit in my life. So instead of becoming a doctor in laws, I did start my PhD, but soon thereafter I started applying for field jobs that I found would have actually something important to offer me, and that they would be extremely interesting. I mean, eventually, some months later, and after a few rejections, not a few, quite a lot of rejections, I was hired with the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, with the mission in Kosovo. I mean, I would just like to underline that one should not be shy from asking people that they're inspired by, how did they achieve their accomplishments? How did they get to where they are right now? But not only, you know, how did you apply? How did you apply for this position. So what did you do in there? I mean, really try to understand what a job or what a profession entails. What is the everyday life and what is their source of energy that makes them wish to follow this. And so don't be shy about asking people how they did things, and meet people as appropriate, you know, share your goals, talk about your plans. It's very important because, you know, they can definitely provide some very constructive feedback.
Yeah.
And never underestimate, you know, a word or an act that you see or that you hear. It can have a great positive impact on you. In fact, for me, it was life-changing at that very, very early stage. And just to say also, be prepared for rejection. It's a part of life. Everyone had to get where they are at a position that they like. You know, they have suffered possibly very hurtful rejections. I mean, sometimes, however, I may say, do apply for what you really want, because I have also had rejections and I felt relieved that they did not choose me. So I said, okay, probably this is not really what I wanted. But for those things that I really wanted to pursue, I mean, gather your energy. And if something is so important to you, assess the situation, ask for feedback, work harder, and persist. So that was a little bit how things moved before I started working. And as was said earlier, yes, I joined the OSCE in Kosovo, first of all, as a legal system monitor, monitoring trials and trying to understand how we could help the justice system by these trials being a sample of what is working, what is not working. We would report and we would also make recommendations how to improve things. It was not so much focusing on specific cases, but more on the system as such, and trying to ameliorate the system for the next phase, the next stages. This was somehow, as you can see, you know, not necessarily the diplomatic dream that I had, but my passion to work with systems so that there can be some positive changes to affect positive results in people's lives. It was becoming true. So for 2 years in Mitrovica, I was monitoring trials myself. And then I became the legal analyst, analyzing these reports, coordinating monitors, assuming more responsibility. And after 3 years in Kosovo, I also became the head of a section that was monitoring very interesting and interesting profile war crimes trials in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yep.
Where I stayed for 4 years, essentially not monitoring trials myself so much, but managing and also leading the team of monitors who were doing so, and we were reporting on the things that needed to improve, as well as a number of other things on national strategies. So over 4 years, as you can understand, I did accumulate not only the substantive experience, but also the managerial one, and with the aspiration of not being just a micromanager, but really just providing a direction, and hopefully everyone can get up to speed to be doing this job. I mean, over time, I think my expertise was recognized, and that's the time when I either grabbed opportunities myself that I saw them, of course, always with the approval of the organization, or I essentially was recommended for other things, for other consultancies, and some I pursued in order to see how this experience that I have would work in other settings. And this is how I was very, very fortunate and privileged to also provide trainings in other countries and see how things work there and see if things can be transferred there. And that was in the Congo, in Goma, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It was also in Georgia thereafter, in Libya, Armenia. And also I took the opportunity, and I was very happy to be entrusted with the responsibility to draft a trial monitoring manual, the methodologies of how to do this, which I believe is still used, and it's probably influencing a number of people around the world that I will never probably meet. So I think it's very important to just somehow, first of all, ensure that you can sustain yourself with a job that provides you, you know, the necessary means to survive. But once you find what you love, I mean, do try everything, do everything to become good at it. If possible, to become an expert at it. Try to have a, you know, a full 360 degrees understanding of how things are done. And if you cannot do it yourself, because probably you enter in a position and you're already a manager, go visit, see how things are done. It's very important to understand the subject of your work, so because only then can you really help the team and can you really achieve the goals that you want to achieve.
Right.
And I think it's very important that I was privileged to have that, to grow in the different and specific positions, and also be able to see both the trees and the forest. So having not only an operational understanding of how things are done, but also gradually having a more strategic overview of how things could be ameliorated. And I have to admit that, you know, it won't be long if you do this, and if you do work hard and understand how things are done, and it won't be long before someone recognizes your expertise, and this is the way that you can eventually achieve your goals, at least at that time, but also use your knowledge to motivate others and also help them grow as well.
Right.
So, I mean, yes, so this is something that I have more or less followed as much as possible throughout my career. And although I felt that at some point I had gained what I was to gain, and I offered what I needed and I wanted to offer in monitoring justice systems and helping these, I have to say I was looking for something a little bit different, and seeing the opportunities, but also the needs, especially. At that time in 2005, 2011, I think, at that time in my home country, Greece, new asylum appeals committees were being created to process a big backlog of cases of persons who were fleeing war and conflict, and they had applied for, had filed asylum applications, or persons who were leaving their homes for lack of the means to sustain themselves. So first as a member and then as a chairperson, as you see, I've already tried for 2 years to understand what was going on, but also becoming a chairperson thereafter. I was deciding essentially people's lives together with my committee members, which is a huge responsibility, but at the same time providing those who were refugees the opportunity to start a life anew. It is very important, especially when you have such responsibility in your hands, to gain all the skills and all the knowledge that you have, that you can to do your job fairly and effectively. But when in 2015, the refugees were arriving on the shores of Greece by the thousands, I think it was very, very hard not to notice and not to want to become involved. That was a time when I joined UNHCR in the breathtaking island where I still am of Samos in Greece. And I was seeking to find a way to help the people arriving on the shores, but at the same time, always having the system in my mind, trying to see how we can really help the authorities meet their obligations, meet their responsibilities, as they were certainly overwhelmed. That was a time, however, that I have to admit I was a little bit in a dilemma, which many people might be at some point in their lives. Having had you know, the opportunity to be speaking with international judges, prosecutors, authorities, having all this background, and having been a manager myself, a head of section, or a chairperson, I have to admit I started with UNHCR having a junior position, a rather junior position. And this was in the protection team, and I was required to work side by side colleagues who were much younger than me. I did think, I did contemplate, is this indeed now an accomplishment, or is it a setback for my career? Is this the best way I can help people with the knowledge and the skills I have? And at that point, of course, I thought, do I feel compelled right now to be helping refugees at the front line? Yes. Okay, that was a given for me. And what do I know about what people go through when they arrive exhausted, and when they arrive after having done these desperate journeys? Or what do I know about empowering people, refugees, to restart their lives? And what do I know about what are the needs of the governmental authorities right now in assisting these people? Not much.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know anything. I could imagine, but I hadn't practiced anything. I didn't know about this. So that was, recalling all the lessons that I had gained earlier, I decided to delve into this new field and learn, start from zero, essentially, pretty much starting from zero. So on the one hand, I was observing people, I was observing my colleagues, I was observing situations, I was updating myself with the legal provisions, the different and separate and very specialized laws. I was trying to understand the political situation and how I could contribute to this. And of course, I was taking advantage of all the training that the organization was providing in person, online, different types of trainings, and also soft skills, how to interview someone, not only for in confidentiality, but also very specialized cases. And of course, I worked in synergy with others to find solutions. And one thing that was, I think, very helpful is try to understand what are the skills and the knowledge that I have acquired over time that I can probably adapt and transfer into this new position.
Right.
So for me, I think it was a time that I learned, and I think it's very important for all to know, don't be afraid to start something new when it excites you and when it is still part of the overall goal of what you want to achieve and the principles you want to follow in your work. And even if it starts from zero, or it seems that you're starting from zero, or you're taking a step back, think about it. Don't stay only in the formalities, but think about it and see what is new for you to learn, and how are the other different ways of helping people that you can achieve these different ways.
Right.
Observe best practices, observe lessons learned, and be humble. It's very important to be humble.
I agree with you, definitely. Pipina, we actually have a question from the audience. Just give me a second. I will read it for you. Right. So during the last few years, we have seen a huge influx of people from all over the world into Europe. This has increased concerns on managing diversity and managing people coming from diverse backgrounds. What is your view on how Europe will handle this increasing diversity? And also fundamentally, why is handling diversity so complicated?
It's a very, very interesting question. And I don't feel that I will be probably able to address all the aspects. I can tell you that this is something that we're facing every day right now in our work. There are a number of challenges that, not only practical ones, the things that are needed for the people to be able to go through the day, but also matters which pertain to integration and acceptance of something or someone who is different. It is a very interesting time. And this is why I believe that every action really counts. Every action that, persons, and for instance, in my organization or as a person as well, And having worked with, working right now with a team of 30 dedicated and inspirational, let's say, colleagues, what we try to do is really from our own area of responsibility to really make sure that, you know, you highlight not only the needs of people, but their potential and the fact that, yes, they may be different in a number of aspects, and that is not bad. And also they are very similar, especially in what their aspirations are to start lives again. In whatever thing you do, in whatever job you have, try to understand what is, you know, the person who is different, and at the same time try to engage with people who may have some doubts, some they may be very skeptical, but at the same time disperse any misunderstandings. The majority of times that we see in our environment is that a number of bad perceptions are essentially a result of misunderstandings,
Right.
or lack of understanding, or willingness, or a threat that one perceives for themselves. And in fact, if we just take a little bit this time to have the difficult conversations instead of avoiding them, but find a way to make people understand with their own concerns, address concerns, I think it's much more, much easier and much more lasting as an effect.
Yeah, you know, I think that this applies to this applies everywhere, you know, at work, at family, you know, it's just about, I mean, people are different, but at the same time, they're all the same, in my opinion. You know, I was actually going to ask you, because you've lived in so many, you know, different countries, you know, you've communicated with people from different backgrounds. What could you actually say in a nutshell? What have you learned about people in general? I don't know if my question makes any sense, because I told you that, you know, I've been also living in Spain, in China, and ultimately what I've learned is that we're all the same, you know, because we always look for the same, you know, things in life. Would you agree with that? Would you actually agree with that? Or what is your opinion? What is your view on that?
I mean, I have to admit that I did undertake all these steps in my career because I did want to meet and understand people.
Yeah.
I wanted to always communicate with people. I find that we have so many things in, you know, completely similar.
Yeah.
That is amazing. It's just that sometimes we express each other in different ways.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult thing to step out of your comfort zone, of the things that you know, and actually, you know, put yourself in the shoes of another person. At the same time, also try to understand if there is something different that, you know, can be transferred to your life. And if I were to just say this is applicable, I believe, not only for people that we help through our jobs, but also through the teams that essentially we might be working with. And it's very important to try to focus on what is bonding us, but at the same time really maximizing the chances of learning something new. If I were just to wrap up a little bit, it's to and something that I would really like to say and repeat is just really don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. And it is something that will essentially, step by step, if you understand not only the goal that you want to achieve, but the principles that you want to work by, and challenge yourself each and every time a little bit more. It's the only way that you can probably grow yourself. You can help your team, motivate and inspire your team to grow themselves. And certainly, such as with refugees, not only cater to their needs, but really, you know, draw the inspiration and the wisdom that they have to solve the problems themselves, and assist, have this interaction and assist everyone to evolve. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pipina Katsaris, and thank you, Desislava. We unfortunately don't have any more time now, but it was a really inspiring story. I really like that. Thank you both very much. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.